us real important. This makes us real important, not the bugs.
Bad. Farther. How big can bugs get?
Days can get real big.
Gee whiz, these things are getting bigger and bigger every single year. Saida, get the bug spray for me.
It's not real, it's just plastic.
I knew that, but it still bugged me. What bugs you? I bet you've got little brothers and sisters that bug you.
Homework bugs me.
And I bet bugs bug you too, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Big bugs and little teeny weeny bugs.
And creepy crawly bugs that live under rocks.
Yep, those too.
And bugs that bite people.
We're going to talk about all kinds of bugs today on Gee Whiz in Agriculture. This is Gee Whiz in Agriculture, and I'm Dr. Carla, and this is my partner, Saida. And this is the show that's going to teach you that agriculture is more than raising chickens and planting tomatoes. Agriculture is a business and industry that affects all of us in a lot of different ways you hadn't even thought about, like entomology.
What's entomology?
Well, entomology is an entire science devoted to the study of insects and arthropods.
And entomology is part of agriculture?
Yep, that's right.
Well, I certainly never thought of bugs as being part of agriculture. I mean, we don't eat bugs.
Well, what about honey?
Well, I like honey and biscuits and honey on tea.
Well, bees help make honey, and bees are insects, so they help give us food. Do you like fruits and vegetables?
Well, I like grapes and oranges and apples.
Well, all those things have got to have insects to help pollinate them, or we wouldn't be producing fruits and vegetables. They have to do all the pollinating.
So without bugs, there would be no apples?
That's right.
Then bugs do make the world a better place to live. Gee whiz.
And Saida, some insects are eaten by some people.
You mean you can actually eat them? Gee whiz again.
But that's only a really small little part of agriculture. Really, insects are almost as important in plants to agriculture, but some of them are real good reasons and some of them are real bad reasons.
Well, I know that some good reasons would be that insects help spread pollen and bees make honey, and I guess if people eat insects, then that's another good one, though I might have to argue with you on that.
Well, actually, more important than insects being food for people is that insects are food for fish and fowl. And that's all part of the food chain that eventually leads to us, people.
So the fish eats the bug, and the bird eats the fish, and then we eat the bird?
Well, it's something like that. Actually, insects are eaten by fish and fowl, and then we eat fish and fowl that dine on insects, so that puts them on the food chain. So one of the most important things an insect has to do is try to stay off the menu.
So bugs aren't all bad, but I know they aren't all good either.
That's right. Actually, they've been around a really long time. They were here even before the dinosaurs. They're really tough little critters, and they were here before people and crops. And they've been around spreading disease and eating crops and causing problems. Actually, insects can account for destroying about 40% of all the food that's produced.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yep, that's a whole lot of food.
Let me get this straight. Insects spread pollen, and that's good, but insects spread disease, and that's bad. And they're part of the food chain, and that's good, but they also destroy 40% of our food, and that's bad. And I think this whole insect subject raises a few questions. What do you think?
Gee Whiz Kids! Gee Whiz Kids! Gee Whiz Kids want to know!
If bugs eat crops, what eats bugs?
How do bugs spread disease?
Were there giant dinosaur bugs millions of years ago?
We have flies and mosquitoes in the summer, but where do they go in the winter? Why do bugs have such big eyes?
I mean, why are bugs so bug-eyed?
Do insects use tools?
How do cows eat grass? Oops, that's another show. Do termites really grow their own mushrooms?
Bugs grow mushrooms?
Bugs give directions like go 2 blocks and turn left at the red light. If insects have 6 legs and centipedes have about a bazillion legs, is a centipede an insect?
Bazillion? What about spiders? They have 8 legs?
Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Up came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again.
How many legs does it take to be an insect?
A bazillion. Gee whiz!
Saida, what are you reading?
A menu.
What menu?
The one you said bugs try to stay off of.
Well, obviously, we've got a lot of questions here we're going to need to clear up. I think it's time to get some expert bug help. I think we need an entomologist.
Which means it's time to find Stefan, and he's out there somewhere trying to find someone who can answer our questions about what's bugging us.
Thanks, Saida. To get answers to those questions that are bugging you, we have come to the University of Kentucky to talk to Dr. Lee Townson. Dr. Townson is an entomologist. Good word. An entomologist is someone who studies insects and their habits. If birds and fish eat insects and farmers try to kill off pest insects, how do insects manage to survive and protect themselves?
They have a lot of different ways that they can try to protect themselves, Stefan. For example, on this plant, how many insects can you see?
Well, I see about 3 right there.
Well, look real close. There's actually 5, and these are all called stick insects. Now, why would they have that sort of name?
Because they look like sticks. They look like little broken twigs.
Absolutely. They blend in. One of the ways insects can protect themselves is to just disappear. And it works. And there are a lot of other ways that insects can protect themselves as well.
It looks like insects have all sorts of special anatomy features that people and other animals don't have. Like these eyes and these legs.
That's right, Stefan. Those legs are powerful jumping legs, so this grasshopper can use them to escape. There are other tools that insects have as well. Honeybees have a comb-like structure on their legs. If you've seen honeybees with loads of pollen on their leg, they have a comb-like structure that helps them gather and carry pollen. Mouth parts are different kinds of tools as well. A housefly has a mouth part that's like a sponge with a tube so that it can drink its food. You can tell a lot about what insects do for a living by looking at the tools they carry around with them. Let's find out more about that.
Okay.
Insects are a member of a group of animals called arthropods. Today we're going to be using some displays at the Living Arts and Science Center in Lexington, Kentucky to talk just about what insects are and some of the features that we use to recognize and identify them. Arthropods are characterized by having some of the features that are really apparent on this nice healthy tarantula. They have segmented or jointed legs. You can see the segments are subdivisions of the legs. Arthropods also have a hard external skeleton called an exoskeleton. This external skeleton supports the muscles. It protects especially from water loss, which is a very important thing that insects and arthropods have to keep up with. We can use the structures on these creatures to identify them and also to tell what role they may play within the environment. Insects are among the most successful animals on Earth, and if we look back into the fossil record, we can see evidence that insects and their ancestors were active at the time that dinosaurs roamed the Earth. The features of a segmented body and the hard exoskeleton of these creatures made them good things to become converted into fossils. One of the most successful insects has been this hissing cockroach. This hissing cockroach lives in the tropical parts of the world and has changed very little from the time that dinosaurs were active. It has the basic insect body plan, the head, the thorax, which contains the legs, and if it's a winged creature, also the wings, and the segmented abdomen that primarily carries the digestive tract and the reproductive organs. This is the very simple, fundamental body plan, and all of the parts are relatively easy to recognize. With some insects, during stages of their life, the typical insect features are not as readily apparent, and in many cases they look quite different during the early part of their life than they do when they're full grown. The features of insects are not as readily identifiable on this hornworm caterpillar. If we look closely, we're able to see the head or first major body region. As we look underneath, we can see the 3 pairs of true legs that show the thorax. The long abdomen contains the reproductive tract and the digestive system, and in this case, because it's a long insect, there are some extra legs on the underneath side to help it move around on foliage and to feed on the plant material that it uses as its food. Part of the program, we're at the Entomology Museum on the campus of the University of Kentucky in Lexington, and we'll be talking about some of the things that insects do and how they have adapted to specifically take care of certain jobs. As we look at people every day, we can determine a lot about what they may do for a living by looking at the tools that they may be carrying with them. Someone with a large screwdriver might be an electrician or a carpenter. A person with a scalpel or some scissors may be a surgeon, and they use these in their work. Other people, such as pharmacists or those that work in labs, may use things like medicine droppers to measure out liquids or transfer them. And computer repair people use specific little tools to pick screws out of hard-to-reach places where they've fallen. We can do the same thing with insects. We can tell what many of them do for a living by looking at the tools that they happen to carry around on their body. And these adaptations have occurred over a long period of time, selecting out ones that are specifically good for certain chores. If we look at the head of insects, the sensory and eating section and where the brain is located on insects, looking at the adaptations for a grasshopper, the basic standard head, and we see the chewing mouth parts, the mandibles that act much like the scissors that someone may use as a surgeon. In this case, the mandibles are used like scissors to cut away plant tissue as the insect feeds. We can also see with some insects through their mouth parts. In this model of the head of a honeybee, we can see the lapping type tube that's on the mouth parts that's used to gather the nectar that the bees bring back to the hive and convert into honey. This works very much like the eyedropper in terms of sucking up the liquid, and there are many insects with sucking mouth parts that use this type of arrangement. We can think of mosquitoes and plant bugs as examples of that. In addition, these bees also have the chewing type mouth part that the grasshopper had, because they have a lot of jobs to do around the hive in forming wax and feeding the small larvae of the bee that are in the cells inside the hive, and these make excellent tools for doing that. Look next at an insect that, by looking at its body shape and form, what might we think it does? It's certainly an unusual looking insect. It's very flattened if we look at it from the side. It's very streamlined, and if we were to look very close at the legs on the underside of the body, we would see a lot of very fine bristles, and we would see that the legs are flat. This insect lives in the water. It uses those flat legs and the fringes on them to row or swim its way through the water. So that gives us an idea of the habitat that it can live in. And actually, if we look back on the tip, there are some small breathing straps. This insect goes up to the surface of the water to get air and then carries that air with it as it moves around below the surface. Now, by looking at the head region, we can get some other ideas of what this creature may do. First of all, notice how large the eyes are. You can see the very large reddish-brown shiny eyes on the front of the head, and the mouth part is a very sharp, pointed beak. What do you think this insect must do for a living? If you guessed that it was a predator or a hunter, you're right. The large eyes are important in finding prey, and the sucking mouth part is used in order to feed on the insects that it catches underneath the water. Notice on the front of the insect it has very strong legs. The front legs are used for not only swimming and moving through vegetation, but for reaching out and grabbing the prey that they feed on. So we can tell a lot about this insect, where it lives, and what it may do for a living simply by using our powers to deduce from what we see. Other things that we may see with insects are how they move around. In this particular case, the large, muscular hind legs of this grasshopper give us the clue that it can hop or jump. What about some other insects that are able to move this way? Fleas are one. We think of fleas as hopping insects, and also flea beetles that feed on plants. So they can use this as a means of escape to get away. Other adaptations that are very important come in the group of insects known as the beetles. Beetles are among the most successful types of insects in the world because they're in large numbers. There are many different kinds, and one of the primary things about beetles that makes them so successful is the very hard wing covers on the outside of the body. This protects the valuable and very fragile flying wings that are underneath here. With our friend the fly, we can see that its clear wings are out and exposed, and they could be easily torn or damaged. But with the beetle, it has the hard covering over the wings that helps protect it. Also, by having this hard area over the body, the beetle is protected from birds and other kinds of damage, and we can see in a succession of different types of beetles that they all are recognizable by having the same type of features, the hard wing covers. We can find out something about how much sensory input insects get by looking at the antennae. These are the feelers or antennae on the front of the head of insects, and if they're very large, long antennae, we think that they must be important in determining where food is and looking for mates and things like that. This fly has very small antennae, so it must not use its sense of smell or detecting chemicals in the air as much, but it does have very large eyes. As we look through insects and their adaptations, we can tell a lot about what they do for a living and use our powers of reasoning to be a detective by taking the evidence that we can find and determining what the life of that creature is likely to be.
How do insects build their homes?
Insects have a lot of different ways of building homes or protected areas. One of the most famous is the hornet's nest. Everyone recognizes those. It's made up of paper from chewed up leaves and bark. If you open up the nest and look inside, you can find hundreds of cells where wasps and hornets raise their young. Lots of ways that insects can protect themselves. Through the magic of video, we'll go and look at some of those right now.
Okay.
Probably most people recognize that many insects do have a place that they live. The honeybee is the prime example. They live together in hives, which many people have seen, and occasionally you'll see swarms out in nature. This is a group of social insects that live together. They go out and collect nectar, bring back pollen, and establish a community in which they live and rear their young. Another example of insects that build their own home and live together are the paper wasps and hornets. This familiar hornet's nest is a sight we see frequently in the fall when leaves drop off the trees. The hornets that make this nest chew the bark off of twigs and limbs, add some saliva to that, and make the paper that contains the envelope of the nest as well as the comb that is inside. Perhaps hundreds of years ago, people watched paper wasps at work and got the idea for making the paper that we use today. The inside of the hornet or wasp nest is very similar to that of the honeybee. There are the cells in which the young are raised, but in the case of wasps and hornets, they're bringing in such things as caterpillars and spiders to feed their young. A group that works together, the wasps and hornets use their sting to paralyze the prey or food items that they bring back to the nest. Some insects, as well as mites, have homes as well, but they must be lazy because they fool the plant into making the home for them. What we're looking at here is a series of plant growths called galls. This is abnormal or irregular cell division on these limbs and twigs that is a result of a chemical that's produced by the insect or mite that happens to be in the center. The gall provides a protected place in which to live. It also surrounds the insect with food. While these things look harmful or like a nuisance, they don't harm most of the plants on which they grow. Galls can occur on twigs and limbs as well as on the leaves. Some insects secrete their own home or covering, and this is the case with many of the scale insects. Some of them produce very white or obvious homes like these pine needle scales. Other scales blend in well with the background and serve as a protection or camouflage. These scale secretions give some protection against natural enemies and make a place under which the insect can live. Insects are an important part of our life, even though we may go for days without seeing a single one. Some insects are competitors for food. They'll feed upon the foods within our gardens. They'll feed on food that's being produced that we get through the grocery store. They can annoy our pets by having fleas that will bite. We can have disease problems that occur from mosquitoes that can carry diseases from person to person. These diseases can be very serious and even keep parts of the world from being developed as they should. While we tend to think of insects often as pests, only a small portion of the 1 million different species in the world actually affect us or are a problem. Many species are helpful to us, and we're beginning to learn how to use them to make a better life for us. By using insects as biological control agents, we can control insect pests and keep them below damaging levels. We can also learn practices that will keep these beneficial insects present rather than reducing their numbers. Also, insects are important in the environment, not only as a part of the food chain, but also as recyclers. We think of termites often as pests around the home, but in fact in nature termites are recycling fallen trees, releasing the nutrients in them and letting them enter the food chain again. Insects are the most numerous and successful group of animals on the earth. They affect us every day. The way we learn to live with them and learn to use the benefit of the services that they provide, such as pollination, makes for a better life and helps us to understand the importance of the science of entomology.
How big can bugs get?
Well, what about if you tell me, take a look at this one. How big is it?
Let's see. I'd say around 5 inches.
5 inches long. This is a Hercules beetle, one of the largest beetles in the world, and in some parts where it grows, the grub stage or immature stage is really considered a delicacy. It's a food that people like. And in many parts of the country, insects are an important part of the diet. They have a lot of protein in them. Sometimes they're cooked, sometimes they're fixed different ways, but people eat insects. Would you be interested in doing that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Even though insects do a lot of damage by eating crops, I'm not sure I'm ready to take revenge by eating Hercules beetles. What about you, Saida?
No, thanks. I wouldn't want to spoil my dinner, but you can tell me how good they are when you try them.
Well, actually, they're probably not anywhere near as bad as they sound, and I bet Dr. Townson has tried every one of those edible insects.
On purpose? What if you're a kid like me and you want to learn more about entomology?
Well, a great way to start is with an insect collection. And you just need to get yourself a net and probably a few bug jars and some leaves and twigs to catch them in. Be sure to poke the holes in the top. And you might even want to get something like Rover over here, a tarantula, to be part of your insect collection.
Is he edible?
Well, he looks a little fuzzy, so I certainly wouldn't try it. But if you're interested in finding out more about insect collections, maybe Stefan can help us out a little.
This is Jason Hedrick and his brother Jordan from Tompkinsville, Kentucky. Jason, tell us about your collection.
Well, my collection consists of different insects that have to do with my 4-H project.
Jordan, where would you find your bugs?
I find the bugs in the woods and the tobacco patch in my backyard.
And how would you identify your bugs?
You can use the encyclopedia, project books, and just different other sources.
I understand that this is a light trap. Tell us about it, please.
This is used to catch moths and different flying things at night. And the way it works is this light attracts them, and they hit the light, and that makes them fall down in the funnel and into the Coke bottle. And when you wake up in the morning, you have specimens without really working for them.
And what are these jars right here?
Well, this right here is a relaxing jar, and it's used to moisten insects in case they become too dry and things like that. And these are killing jars. And this killing jar right here, I've used rubber bands in it, and I've saturated it with fingernail polish remover. And in this one, I've used just a plain old cotton ball. And the reason you use this fingernail polish remover is because it knocks the insects out so you can pin them.
Tell us about your collection.
Well, this right here is my collection, and it consists of insects that I've collected throughout the years in my project.
I'm dying to ask you this question, but do you ever eat the bugs that you catch? There you have it, from 2 young experts, maybe future entomologists. Good word. But I'm still not getting much enthusiasm about eating bugs. What about back there in the studio, Saida?
Stefan, nothing's changed. Saida is still not interested in trying any of those delicious chocolate-covered ants.
Maybe later, like when dinosaurs start roaming the world again.
Now, you better remember Jurassic Park when you say things like that. Well, that's about it. We're out of time for today's show, and it's been a really good show. We've learned all kinds of things, like all about insect tools.
And anatomy.
We learned that insects eat our crops.
But birds and fish and other insects eat insects.
And some people even eat insects.
Gee whiz.
And gee whiz, we need to thank our guests like Dr. Lee Townson.
And Jason Hedrick.
And of course, we can't forget Stefan.
And the Gee Whiz kids.
And everybody else who helped out on today's program, because without them, it wouldn't be Gee Whiz in Agriculture.